Hello and welcome. I'm Tom Oppenheim. I'm the artistic director of the Stella Adler Center for the Arts, and I wanted to wish you a happy May Day. I'm so excited to welcome you to Form and Freedom in Art and Life, a conversation between Dr. Cornel West and Maestro Ron Carter. Ron Carter, as I'm sure many of you know, is one of the greatest jazz bassists of all time. He's one of the greatest jazz musicians on any instrument ever. He's also one of the greatest musicians in any genre that this country has ever produced. His biography reads like a synopsis of all of Western music, from jazz to classical music to hip hop, hard bop, rock, bossa nova, and so on. We put a link to his biography in the chat and urge you to read it. It's an educational experience in itself. Dr. Cornel West is one of the foremost public intellectuals of our or any other time. He's one of the greatest love warriors this country has ever produced, with his own heroes and sheroes. John Coltrane, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Anton Chekhov, and Jane Austen, to name but a few. Dr. West teaches us absolute condemnation of no one, absolute embrace of everyone. We've put a link to his bio in the chat, along with links to events that we've been blessed to do with Dr. West. Please find them there. These are national treasures. Briefly, the idea for this conversation came from a dear friend and colleague named Jack Weatherall, with whom I was discussing the speaking of Shakespeare. Jack was talking about the importance for young actors to understand Shakespeare's iambic beat. Even if they want to break the beat, they first must understand it, said Jack. By way of an explanation, Jack mentioned an interview he heard with Ron Carter, talking about an album he made based on the music of Johann Sebastian Bach. I couldn't have played with Bach, said Carter, unless I first understood Bach's beat. Whether you're working with Bach's beat or Shakespeare, in jazz, acting, painting, poetry, dance, or theater, art is always a marriage of form and freedom. We train rigorously to obtain freedom. The goal isn't mere freedom, but meaningful freedom, impactful freedom, shared freedom. As a theater artist and educator, I've always looked to jazz as the greatest model of this marriage of form and freedom. There are no greater models of this marriage than the music of Maestro Ron Carter, or the philosophical and poetic passions of Dr. Cornel West, who in his own words is a blues man in the life of the mind, a jazz man in the world of ideas. So quick housekeeping, Cornel and Maestro will talk for about an hour, and then we will open the floor for questions. Please put questions in the chat and we will answer as many as possible. Also to say that we're recording this event, which we will freely share, because at the Stella Adler Center for the Arts, we believe deeply in the democratization of the arts and public access to great minds and transformative souls. So at this time, I'm going to invite Dr. Cornel West and Maestro Ron Carter to turn on their cameras and microphones. And here's Cornel. Here he is.
It's dear maestro and brother and visionary leader and exemplary human being, indeed, indeed.
Young man, how are you this afternoon?
Brother, I tell you, I'm just still levitating from that performance you gave on Monday night. You know, my dear beloved wife Anahita and I were there, and you and brother Donald and Russell just lifted our souls, oh brother, to Blue Note. It was magnificent. Sister Quintilla too. Quintilla, your beloved wife, was there. I mean, it was just a magnificent, magical evening, beginning with the connection with the great Ahmad Jamal, who had died that night. You remember?
Yeah, we were happy. Had him in our spirits. You know, he's not here, but he left enough quality equipment for us to live with for a very, very long time.
Isn't that the truth, though, brother? Definitely. But I think we both want to begin by saluting Brother Tom Oppenheim. You know, he's a very, very special brother, special calling. I've been there with him when he's had performances of Shakespeare with students, especially Black and brown, indigenous, Asian students, got the lines down, just like you finding the right notes in your magnificent PBS show. He's getting them to get the right lines with their own voices. You know, he comes from Stella Adler. She's one of the greatest intellectual and artistic figures in the history of the American stage. And then Jacob, her father, founder of the Yiddish theater. So what a rich and deep tradition he comes from. And
yes, indeed. Yeah.
Very much so. But brother, I'm just so humbled and honored just to be in conversation with you, though, man. I mean, whew, you're one of the greatest waves in the ocean of the great traditions of human beings tied to form and freedom. And Sarah Vaughan, John Coltrane, Art Tatum, Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Mary Lou Williams, Billie Holiday, and here comes the brother from Ferndale, Michigan.
Yes.
Ron Carter. Maestro.
With both feet.
You know, I wonder whether you want to share a little bit of your story of what it meant to begin there in classical music, go to the great Eastman School of Music, upstate New York, playing that cello and the legacy of Pablo Casals and others, then making that shift to bass and double bass and ended up becoming the great love warrior and freedom fighter that you are.
Okay, I'll make it not long, because if I do, then your listeners, as many as there who will enjoy this show now and to the taping of it, they will not want to read it anymore. So I'll say a few things to kind of give you a hint to how I got to almost where I am today talking to you, which is an amazing part of my life. I just added another line to another ring in my tree. Cornel West. I said, okay, I can, my tree can stand that. I'm having a birthday this week, Thursday, I think, number 86. And if we can go back 14 years to when I was 1950, 1949, it's a long way back. But being in the back then, segregation was the byword. Being from being in an all-black neighborhood, all-black school,
right,
with all-black teachers, we had a great time. Having said that, however, a lady teacher, conductor, evidently, from one of the local high schools came to visit these kids, these colored kids at this all-black elementary school. And we added to this room. And in this room, there were a table with these instruments strung along. She had decided, Doc, that she's going to have a music program at this school, and these instruments that these kids are going to have to play, because that's what she had to offer us. She said, okay, children, come up to the table carefully and just look around and touch stuff and see which one you want to spend some time with. Which one do you want to get to know better? And at 11 to 12, the cello seemed to be the easiest to make a sound immediately. It wasn't a very good sound, of course, but it was a sound. And I thought that, gee, maybe I could have some fun learning what this does. My first contact with physical music was that. I got pretty good at it, and as I improved, my teachers at that time felt that they couldn't help it, so they would recommend another teacher who was able to teach a different level of the instrument. So during my time in Ferndale before I went to Cass Tech, I already had 4 teachers along in the past 3 years who saw me kind of outgrow what they could show me. So I go to Cass Tech, which is a great school in Detroit. We call it the early we call it the early colleges for kids. You take them to get in. They have special courses, whether it's sewing or cooking or music or auto mechanics or art, a complete junior college curriculum. They had a marching band, they had an orchestra, they had a small group, they had a choir, they had all this stuff, man. And this is, we just turned 16, 17, this kind of program, kind of menu we had, you know? So, you know, I'm getting better and better. And I was in the orchestra. I played E-flat clarinet in the marching band, in the concert band. I played tenor saxophone in the marching band. So I was trying to understand what the choices were. And they could earn the right to be one of those choices that they had to pick from. So I'm looking around and I'm noticing that the schools back then had PTA meetings, you know, and they conferences. And they would ask each school to present some music for them, like kind of like wallpaper, you know. So I looked around, and a couple of these things had been invited to Cass Tech, and I didn't get the call to do this thing. And I said, wait a minute, man, I'm as good as everybody else. I'm practicing. I learned the library. This picture doesn't sound like I belong in it. Well, I'm not buying that. So I look around one day, and there's only one bass player who was graduating the spring of 1955. I say, my math has always been pretty good. If you subtract 1, there's no one there, that's a 0. But they must have a 1. Okay, Doc, I'm gonna be that 1. So I sold my cello, bought a bass on time, and began to take lessons from the Philharmonic, from this orchestra guy in Detroit. And I was a bass player my last semester at Cass Tech. In the meantime, Eastman School of Music was having auditions. The cellist at the time, George McKell, was the guy who was holding these auditions at Cass Tech, in the case in Detroit, Cass Tech. And so I prepared a program for him as best I could, kind of on my own, you know. And he had made the decision that he thought I had some talent, and since he was on the staff at Eastman School of Music, that he could get me a scholarship to go there. Well, I said, well, yeah, man. You'll get no. September 1955, I enrolled in the Eastman School of Music with a gigantic scholarship, Doc, of $800 a semester.
That's a lot of money in those days, though. That's a lot of money.
Man, especially my large family from Detroit, from Ferndale, moved to Detroit because my father couldn't get hired as an African American, as a colored man, African American back in the day, because he was too good at what he did. You know, he could support a wife, 2 kids, 2 boys, 6 girls, but to get a job as a bus driver, which he drove for 35 years.
My God.
He could only take the job if he moved to Detroit.
Oh.
So, hey, he come to Detroit, here we come. So I'm now in Detroit. I'm going to Cass Tech, and I got the scholarship to get to Eastman School of Music, and I get to Eastman School of Music. And there were like not very many minorities there, and it's really a hotbed of competition. Everyone's practicing to be better than everybody else. That's what they do. The schools encourage that kind of mindset of excellence, and the only way to get that level to be competitive is by be better than everybody else. You know? Doc, one of the questions I'm always asked about this stuff is that, what did I learn from classical music that I've transferred to jazz? So I tell them I learned how to practice. My time was so limited. I was working in the kitchen to have scholarship. I was walking a mile and a half to school every day. I was playing as often as I could, wherever I could. I involved in the Rochester jazz scene, even as little as I knew what to do. And the only way I could pass the expectancy level of me as a minority would be better than that expectation level. To do that, Doc, I had to practice.
Mm-hmm.
I had to practice. I had to practice some more. Ultimately, two things happened. I got the call to do the house band at a place called the Ridgecrest Inn, which was in the little city outside of Rochester. And this club hosted the jazz bands who would come from upstate New York or Canada going to New York. There was a stopover for all the great bands. And the Miles, the Dizzy, Horace Silver, Carmen McRae,
Mm-hmm.
they all stopped at Ridgecrest Inn, and I was in the house band. So I had a chance to hear them every weekend, man. For the past 2 years, for the year I was in Rochester working, I would spend my weekends there with these people, Sonny Stitt, Slim Gaylor, you know, and they encouraged me to say that, well, New York needs a good bass player. When you finish, you should come to New York to join the bands, you know. Before I got that far, I'm really playing good classical bass, man. I mean, I'm really on my feed, so to speak, you know. And again, you know, every school year, the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra, RPO, would want to fill out the orchestra with student players. And they would ask the teachers, of course, or whoever was to make the decisions, who would fit in the orchestra, who would be a possible new addition to the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra. And it happened that the year I was, my last year there, they needed a bass player. Now, there were 8 or 9 student bass players at that time. And of course, no one looked upon me as being the choice. Well, fooled you, I got the choice. I was the choice, so I was probably the first of color to be in the RPO in 1959.
Wow.
Having said that, we were playing with all the great conductors, Pierre Monteau, Frederick Cornel, all the Eric Leinsdorf, all the really top conductors. It was a great orchestra to be in. And the one who fancied me was Leo Postakowski. He's the guy who did the Walt Disney stuff, the Fantasia. Yeah. And you know, he's like a 5'7", 5'8", and I had great posture. I was like 6'4", you know. So he's looking up at me and says, "I'd like to have you in my orchestra, but they're not ready for colored people." I said, "Well, gee, I kind of had to myself. I heard that before, you know." So here's this person telling me, as good as I play, the field that I'm trying to get into is not ready to accept someone like me. And on the jazz scene, they said, "Hey, man, come on to New York, you can find work." Well, I graduated June 1959 and left for New York August of the same year. Got an apartment with my wife, and my first gig in town was with Chico Hamilton with Eric Dolphy. That started to help me get to talking to people like you right here, right now.
What a story, what a journey, what a pilgrimage, my brother.
Yes, sir.
Oh, yes, indeed. And you know, I would put this, given my own Christian sensibility, it was like the Lord was pushing you into the greatest musical tradition of the late modern world of the 20th century, which is Black music of artistic creativity, spiritual fortitude, and moral courage, willing to step out and take a risk on nothing and still land on something and empower other souls and unsettle other minds with music unprecedented in the most barbaric of any century recorded time, which is the 20th century. So here you shifting from this rich classical tradition of our various European brothers and sisters, Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, Brahms. Oh, we acknowledge their genius and their giant contributions. But then here comes this Black musical tradition waiting with Ron Carter. Say, ooh, he's bringing all of what he learned at Ferndale, Cass, and Eastman. And there was Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington and Miles and Coltrane and Sonny Rollins and so many others waiting for you on that bass, shifting from the cello. We had this spiritual force like going on, brother. Just come on.
Get over
brother.
here.
Come on, brother Ron. And
Get
people
over
always talk
here.
about
Yeah.
the fact that you're the most recorded, the 2,200 and so and so. But it's not just the quantity, it's the quality. It's the quality, it's Miles' quintet, and it's Killing Me Softly with Roberta Flack and so many others. Can you give us some sense of how you were able to wed these three elements of jazz, of the blues, of swing, of improvisation on that bass with the rhythm and harmony that you're generating your own unbelievably unprecedented way with people like Miles and so many, Eric Dolphy. I mean, these are
But, you know, all those musics, Doc, have can I call you Doc?
Oh, absolutely, brother or Doc, either way. But I'm deferring to you because you are my brother and you are my maestro and you are what I aspire to be, my brother. I got a long way to go. I got a long way to go.
You know, all those musics, Doc, have the same thing in common. They all have form. Whether we understand the form or we have to work to find it, they all have form.
And what do you mean by that when you say form, my dear maestro?
The shape, how many bars per unit make the first part of the tune-up. Generally, the normal standard form is 32-bar song, 8, 8, 8, 8. And this form, this system of music, all those musics, as different as they are, they have that form. My job, Doc, is to understand what is this form? One. Two, they all have a sound center. We call it keys, but they all have a sound system about them. You know, Miles used to like D minor all the time and F, you know, for example. Sonny Rollins, C is his kind of sound center when they really play. So really, that's the sound that they're chewing on night in and night out.
Right.
You know, and they all have one other thing, a variety of rhythms. They all have some kind of rhythm. My job is to find out what's the form of this tune. Whoever it is, they got a form. Two, what is the key center? What sound makes this form even more valid? And three, what kind of rhythm are they using? What makes them do like this? What kicks that kind of stuff off? Now, Miles had his three things. And it gets the form, he loved form. He liked changing the form, but there was a form. He had a great sound in his ear that he wanted to match with this certain thing. And of course, his sense of rhythm, like Muhammad Jamal, was perfect.
Yeah.
But Q-Tip, Tribe Called Quest, they got a form. They got stanzas. And even though they're talking, Doc, they're talking with a certain tone of voice.
Yes.
And the rhythm is when they stop and make the breaks in the conversation. Goes and saying certain words. My job is how soon can I find these three elements in place with whoever's giving me the information? That's my job.
Wow.
And I'm getting better at it, man.
Oh,
I'm getting better at it, man.
But see, part of the challenge though is here you almost 86 years young, reaching the highest level of what the Greeks would call arete, which is excellence in all of its forms. Not excellence just in the technical sense, but excellence in the sense of being soulful. What Brother Wynton Marsalis calls the sharing of a soothing sweetness of in the sound and bringing the technical mastery of craft with the kenosis, the self-emptying of yourself, because it's got that distinctive Ron Carter, Ferndale, Michigan chocolate slice of Detroit sound in it, which is uniquely individually Ron's, but is collectively because it's over against the voices of so many of the other great artists and musicians. So we lift every voice, which is the anthem of Black folk. And you can't be a great jazz musician without finding your voice. But it's a perennial process of doing it. But let me ask you this then, because form and freedom. I mean, I think, for example, of some of the great breakthroughs of artistic form. You think of our Persian brothers and sisters who have created some of the greatest poets, Rumi, Hafiz, Neiman, and so forth. You think of our Irish brothers and sisters who created such great freedom and form on the stage, in theater, culminating with a Beckett, let's say, but tied to an Oscar Wilde or whatever. The Russians in the novel, we can go on, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Turgenev, going back to the great African himself, Alexander Pushkin, the godfather of Russian literature. And then when it comes to Black music, where the form and freedom, we've had great writers and so forth, so on, but in that music, that form and that freedom has to be connected to some kind of deep calling or vocation rooted in a love of the music, love of the freedom, love of the form and the transforming of the form. And it touches all of us so that we want to be more free. We want form in our own lives. We want more love in our own lives. When you were playing Monday night, brother, my soul was going through some transfiguration connected to a radical love and freedom, a radical freedom and love tied to your form that was touching my soul, owing to your own soul and musical genius that allowed that communication to take place. Now, this makes sense to you, though, brother? Am I?
Absolutely. Yeah, but let's just hold that for a moment. Let's just talk about those two words, freedom and form.
Yes.
Now, the freedom is kind of an overused word that's often used when it's not happening. Now, and I'm going to give you an example. There's a section of music now where guys who've been titled playing free, not necessarily by them, but by the people who give titles. So this guy's playing free form. Is that an oxymoron? Free and form? Free means there's no form, but form means there's limited freedom because there's a box that they're in.
Right.
So I asked the guy, I said, well, man, what is free form? How can you have both of those things at the same time? You can manipulate one or the other, but I'm not sure you can have free with no boundaries and call that a form. It's like an amoeba. It's a shape, but it's hard to pin it down because the shape is mutating, it's changing. For every drop of water, it's going like this. I like to think of freedom, Doc, as the ability to do different things within this form, box, the shape, to maintain the integrity of the intent. But there's fresh growth in that doesn't feel like something that this composer would think about. So for him, because I've just made this form a different kind of form because I'm adding some different notes to it. I'm some different changes. I'm playing half notes rather than just a beat. I'm playing freely within his form. And I'm really getting good at that now, man. I've been doing it for a while. I forgot for a while. That's what that is, huh? Yeah.
But part of it, though, I think has to do with which conception of freedom we're really talking about. Because if you believe that there is no freedom without some constraints and some, what Plato called anange, the limitations given our human finitude, then every conception of freedom that's actually going to have substance is always already under constraints and some limitations, even as it transgresses those limitations and constraints. Very much so. But you take a town figure like Sun Ra. Now, Sun Ra say, okay, I'm coming in from the planet. This is an orchestra. We're going to take you outside of Earth. He still got legacy of Duke Ellington working. He's still got the legacy of the forms, but he's taken it in place where people say, dang, Sun Ra's out here flying like the birds and things. He must be free form. No, that's misleading. That's misleading. He's still.
Look, Doc, here's the drummer doing like this on the hi-hat.
Ah, yeah.
The big bass player doing like this. He's playing Cornel time, by and large.
Right.
And you get those two elements, man. That pattern, that's the word. That pattern that you just gave me.
Yeah.
How to manipulate this pattern and still be free without the pattern. You know, it's like a sewing. You can sew your own pattern, man, but you still got thread.
Yes, yes.
To hold your freedom in some kind of touchable shape. That people can count on it.
Absolutely.
Just think about it.
How do you account, though? How do you account for the fact that Black music is so world historical? It's almost like the history of our precious Jewish brothers and sisters in terms of scripture, biblical scripture, and literary expression, and has a disproportionate impact of the world given the small numbers of people. Well, in the 20th century, when it comes to musical expression, with just a small slice of the world population, but it's had a disproportionate impact in shaping the musical culture of every corner, nook, and cranny on the planet. And it's not skin pigmentation, you see, it's just Black people who undergo various forms of form and freedom and musical expression that generates this culture that the rest of the world takes notice because of the excellence, the greatness, the energy, and the love. I think there's a whole lot of love in your bass playing, and a whole lot of love in Coltrane's saxophone, a whole lot of love in Oscar Peterson's piano. You know what I mean?
Yes. Okay, well, I think a couple of things. One of the bigger things, Doc, is the jazz musician, in this case, African American jazz musician. None of us, very few, have decided to be the writers of this music, the literary writers. None of us have stopped to say, let us title this music. Let us pigeonhole our sound. Some guy called John Coltrane's Sheets of Sound. Well, man, that's not what I would feel about it, but that's an accepted word because some guy did it in a Downbeat magazine.
Right.
Or wherever the first guy was to say that was not from the African-American community. You know, I think one way to bend that curve, man, is to have more of us, you, writing the stuff that we have allowed the other part of the race to be in charge of, whether it's publication, whether it's skill level of writing, whether it's knowing how to write, whether it's the desire to write, whether it's more experienced in how to write this feeling. I had a recording session the other day, and I was explaining to the producer who wanted something a little different flavor from me, you know? I said, well, one of the problems right now is that the jazz community language is so non-documented that one word that you may think is the right answer for me doesn't mean anything to me because I don't know what that word means. A simple word is gas. That cat is gas. That means really good sometimes. What's the man the guy gassed out? I mean, he's terrible. So that kind of stuff. So he's trying to help me. I'm asking him to help me verbally to explain to me what he wants from me differently.
I hear you.
And he found a language, some words that were common to him and my music. And that allowed me to figure out he really wants this, but he doesn't know how to verbalize it. So I'll trust my sense of what he's aiming for. And I think we kind of abdicated that role of being the guy who says, no, man, that's not free form. I'm playing with shape. I got four corners. I got the same tonal frame. I'm just changing up what I want to do. I'm free to do. I'm free. That's the word. I am free to work in this box.
Absolutely. See, I love that. I love that. I love it. I think part of the challenge, though, you brother, you correct me now, is that, see, I don't think there can be a critic that can ever do justice to the complexity and the depth and the range of the music itself.
Unless it's a performer.
Yeah, exactly. Or unless somehow they're on the inside. That's true for Beethoven. You know what I mean? Beethoven and the other, Beethoven doesn't have a critic that's commensurate with his music. Mozart doesn't either. Well, the great jazz musicians like yourself, I mean, I thank God for, the Stanley Crouchers and the Spellmans and the Baracas and others as Black critic, but we also thank God for Barry Ulanoff. We thank God for Natty Hentoff and so many others who have made contributions, but all of them are going to fall short because
they're not playing, never played anything.
Exactly. So you can appreciate it, but they're going to fall radically short.
Okay,
so
like the solution,
paraphrasing James Joyce and Kafka, the
hey, look, man, the solution is my bio, my documentary. That's the solution.
I love that, because you can see it, you can hear it. You are speaking yourself as the voice who produces the magnificent music. And it's true that the musicians don't always have a monopoly on the truth about their own music, because the music's deeper than them.
Yes.
The higher power, whatever language people want to use, that's working through you, which is part and parcel of what any great musical tradition is, any great artistic tradition is. And so there is this sense of people having to be humble enough to say, I'm gonna do the best that I can to write about it, but it's better just to hear it and allow the voice of the musicians to be heard in terms of what goes into it. I mean, you talk about 117 Special, and you say, ooh, 117 Special, what's going on? Underground Railroad. Ooh, Ron Carter on the Underground Railroad, what's going on? You lay it out.
Oh, as only I can.
I love it. I love it. A song for a friend in relation to your precious father, man.
Yes.
Oh, my God.
That's the feeling that you can write about it, because you're in that feeling.
You in that feeling. And you convey that feeling to us, though, man. We got people listening. You go home and listen to 117 Special, a song for a friend. Ron Carter, like so many others, good God Almighty. You and Hank Jones together, you and Christian McBride together. Oh my God, man.
Absolutely. The truth tellers.
Truth tellers, magical metaphysicians, redefining reality. And it's very interesting in the history of Black literary figures. You see that we know Ralph Ellison wanted to write like Louis Armstrong, and we know James Baldwin wanted to write like both Bessie Smith and Ray Charles. And we know that Toni Morrison, I think, is the greatest one of them all, that she's many ways wants to write like Sarah Vaughan. Every time I went into Toni Morrison's house, she had Sarah playing. And Sarah—
Walter Mosley.
Oh, Walter Mosley and his magnificent writing. Now, I don't know which musician he's preoccupied with. You remember? Ron Carter. Is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't realize that, though, brother. I'm learning all the time. That's fascinating that a younger brother like that, because he's that's a transgenerational thing that's even further removed than, let's say, Ralph Ellison write about Louis Armstrong. Good God Almighty, Ralph Ellison was born 1913. Louis, we don't know when he born, but he said 1904. Okay, Louis, okay. Thank God you were born. That's all we want to know.
Absolutely correct. You're here.
All that joy and love and genius touching us in ways we couldn't even conceive of. But let me ask you this in terms of younger generation, though, brother, and the younger jazz musicians. How do we pass on the artistic, spiritual, and moral greatness of the music? We're not talking necessarily about just the lives of the musicians, but what the music does to people. How do we pass that on to the younger generation, man?
Well, they have to be convinced that they have the power to do that. I think, let me jump back about 40 years. I've been playing this bass, the same bass, by the way, since 1959. I've been playing this music since 58, 57. And I didn't really get an understanding of the power of the bass until like 1963 or so, 62. And I say the power of the bass, not for the volume. I don't mean loud.
Right.
For its impact on the music and the band. I would do these things. This really gets some personal stuff. So if I get too far out, just
no. You be free in
let
your
me go.
phone.
That's absolutely right. I would play certain notes or a certain rhythm, and I would see how they would affect the band because they're most immediate. They're 5 feet away from it. Not so much the audience because they're a lot more distant, but these guys are right in my circle, literally. And I would play these certain notes, Doc, or certain rhythms, and the band's eyebrows would go up to here. And they would play differently from that point on, that tune, for example, or that finished the chorus. And one day I said, look, I have to stop and find out what that is. And I was at a recording session with the late, great Oliver Nelson.
Oh, yeah.
We're doing this song, we did a record date and we finished. And one of the New York dates, the 2 to 5 with a possible hour over kind of stuff, After the date, he said, why don't you come here for a minute? I said, okay. I'm thinking either the check bounced or we got another tune to do and can I play overtime? Okay, because Oliver, he's supposed to get that, wherever that is. She says, look, the date's from 2 to 5. And you got here at about 10 minutes past 1. I gave you the music. And by the date time, it sounded like you had the music 3 days before I get out of the session. How do you do that?
Ooh.
And how do you pick the notes that makes me stop in my tracks to find out where you're going with that note? What makes that happen for you? And so the only answer I could have is I just hear it and I think it belongs right there. I can't tell till I actually hear it and put it there. But when I get it right, man, the color of the band changes, man. The intensity of their presence stops right there.
Wow.
And if I can get them to do that, I got them. It means I can do anything I want within reason. And the rhythm that's going to work for me, I can make it work for them because they now trust they got a plan. Now, that's what I call the power of the bass.
The power of. Now, what was it about 1962 and 63 that allowed you to have that kind of breakthrough, though?
I was older. I was more settled in my way.
You wasn't that old, though, brother.
Yeah, I was old enough to know no good notes and bad notes.
Yeah. All right.
I'd worked with Sonny Rollins. I'd worked with Roland Hanna. I'd worked with Bobby Timmons. I'd worked with quality players who were also looking for something to do. Something not necessarily different than Bud Powell or whoever the hot piano player was, but they had a sound in their ear. They had a phrase, and they were willing to take a chance to see if it worked.
Wow.
When they found it, they were new guys. After they were new on the new path. And so it occurred to me that each note I played, Doc, check this out. Each note I played does the following things. It tells the band where I am in the song. It tells them what I think the chord is by my note, by that one note.
By one note.
It tells them the dynamic. Am I playing loud or soft with the dynamic of the band? It tells them what rhythm I'm playing, a bossa nova, a swing, funk,
Right.
That's just 4 things. That one note does these 4 things, man. And I can't think of anything that's more powerful than that coming at you all night, every night.
Good God Almighty.
I'm not playing 4 courses and down like a horn player do. I'm playing the whole night. I'm the constant, this bass note. Those choices You're at him all night, man. If I'm feeling it, they got a long road. They got a long night because I'm trying to feel.
Ooh, Lord, 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 Lord.
Yeah, they got a long night coming.
They got a long. I saw that Rich Dollar with the old brother Stanley Clark. Good God Almighty,
Yeah.
Same kind of thing. And you think about it at the cultural level, though, that kind of excellence, genius, and talent of Black men and Black women in a white supremacist society that's telling them that they are less intelligent, less beautiful, less moral, less creative, and yet being able to engage at this level of form and freedom, not preoccupied with white culture's various forms as points of reference, but simply conversant with it, but defining our own sense of who we are as human beings, falling back on our own tradition, conversing with other traditions, but starting on the chocolate side of town. Now, you see, just to be able to witness that, man, to see Ron Carter and the others right there at the center, making those kind of choices that have those kind of consequences, that's an enactment of freedom that we don't have too often in the larger society, brother.
Nope. Only on the bandstand.
Isn't that something? Isn't that something? And everybody, no matter what color, Asian, European, Latin,
Doesn't matter.
they want to get in on that human thing.
Doesn't matter. That's correct. Come one, come all.
Come one. I've seen you in Indonesia. I've seen you in Japan. I've seen y'all. And that's true for the musicians as a whole.
Sure,
but you have said that you never played with Coltrane, no?
No, at the time he had left Miles' band, he put the quartet together. And when he put the quartet together, Miles put together the new quintet.
Right.
And the schedules were never
just
equal enough.
I think in the studio, because it wasn't 63 to 68, you with Miles, and then Coltrane gonna die in 67. And he was
working all the time, man. He's on the road more than Miles was.
Yeah.
The most I could say, I had a great time recording with his wife, Alice Coltrane.
Ooh. Now, she's a one and only too in so many ways.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
I just saw Robbie, me and Anna, he just saw Robbie just a couple of months ago.
Okay.
And, he sounded so good. He's in the.
I know he does. Yes.
Oh, yeah, but you played with the one and only Alice Coltrane.
Yeah, made a couple of records with her. Yes. Wow. Out of the studio. He had a little studio in his garage out in Dix Hills.
Right. So you had a chance to talk with him and interact. You just didn't play in the studio with him.
Yes, that's correct.
Because both of y'all have such a gentle spirit given your genius. You know how rare genius and generosity is when they come together? Genius and humility is. Both you and Train got that, man.
Well, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to play with him, because I would have had some wonderful musical conversations with him.
But you had other conversations. See, that's cool.
Yeah, but I'm looking for the ultimate one.
The ultimate one, the music one.
Yes, yeah.
No,
I missed that. Sorry. I regret, but I hear him.
Ooh.
That's not as good as playing with it, but his memory, his concepts, his solos, his intensity, his intonation, it's the quality of sound. And I miss it. I miss not being I miss not being in the middle of that.
Ooh, but I'm sure he must have heard you in his musical ear too.
Yeah, but he had a good band.
Oh, no. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's true.
Yeah, Jimmy Garrison, Elvin McCoy.
Yeah.
Great players.
No, it's so true. It's so true. Good God Almighty.
I made records with McCoy, 4 or 5 CDs, LPs, and with Elvin, 4 or 5 or 6 with McCoy, and Jimmy and I talked all the time about bass. So I was a part of the band, communally speaking.
Right. Yeah, without, yeah. And you had the great Roy Haynes early on. Early
Absolutely.
on.
Yeah.
He's on After the Rain. He's on After the Rain with Coltrane, which is my favorite Coltrane song, actually. But
yeah. I was a friend of all those guys, communally speaking, and I just didn't have enough time. Schedule's not permitting to have me get everywhere where I wanted to be, but someone had a plan for me to get somewhere else.
right, that's right. That's
And
exactly right.
when a few times I didn't say no.
Ooh,
Let's go that way. Yes, sir.
wow. Good God Almighty. Whew, now I know we're supposed to open it up with Brother Tom, because you know I could talk to you all night. If I pulled out my cognac, brother, we'd be at it for hours. See, you got some H2O yourself.
Yes, I'm thirsty and going on 86.
Ooh, but we say happy birthday, man.
Thank you.
I'm grateful to have you in the world. And at 86, man, the sharpness of your mind, your heart's always been golden, and your genius has always been a form of giving to others. But 86 years old, and I'm trying to catch up with you in so many ways. Intellectually, man, it's true. I'm telling you.
Well, right now you got a chance because I'm wearing my house shoes.
And you 6'4" and I'm about 5'11" on a good day, 5'10" on another day. Brother Tom, look at that beautiful smile you got, man.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was just glorious. Speaking directly to the title of this about form and freedom is just so meaningful. And I worry, I worry from that kind of rigor that you were talking about, Maestro, that is being questioned at our peril. I just find it so interesting that the value of freedom is the way you both were discussing the value of freedom being measured by the rigor of form, and I'm deeply grateful for the conversation and for your capacity to address that. By the way, I want to say happy birthday. One of the comments was happy birthday, Maestro. And I think it's relevant that I actually have, elder that I am, I have a 7-year-old daughter. And on this night, this May Day of this conversation, she lost her first tooth.
Ooh,
so
beautiful.
Big,
that's beautiful.
Yes, it's a big night in the Oppenheim household.
Put it under a pillow. Put it under a pillow now.
Yes, sir. Yes. I was trying to say the same thing. Yes.
No, indeed.
Will do. Mr. Carter, what are some of the biggest challenges young musicians will face as they grow as artists? That's a question from a Johnny Rockwell.
I think 3 things. The lack of school music in the high schools and elementary schools. Back when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, there was always music in elementary school, even if it was only a gospel choir.
Mm-hmm.
But there are no real, most schools don't have music programs. And I think that's one thing that the jazz player today misses, because he's not growing up to be fertilized at an early age with this music called jazz, because he's hearing no music in school. But he's hearing this on the radio outside, or kids singing tunes, but he's not involved in the organized fashion of understanding this sound called music. The second thing is trying to find a teacher who's experienced enough to explain to him some of the details he needs to know. I know a lot of guys my age group can do that, and they are, in fact, are doing it to a degree. But it kind of behooves the younger group to talk to a live historian to understand the floor plan. to understand what makes his house still stand after all these years. You know, on my DVD, I go back to my home in Ferndale that my father built.
Mm-hmm.
The house is still standing like brand new. The house is 85 years old, man. 86, whatever it is, 86. It's still there, man. Whatever you put in there besides his sweat and love is some physical elements, brick, cement, used nails, homemade screens. That's the history of that house, man.
Wow.
And I think that the younger musicians should stop doing their thing, just find somebody that they can say, hey man, how did this happen? I'm not asking them to copy that person's style or transcribe his stuff. I'm asking you to find somebody older, experienced, who will sit down with you and not just hang out. You know, not just a quick 3-chorus hello. Who will sit down with you and answer a question in detail. But to make that happen, you got to do your share. That's to seek me out. Me, plural, not me, plural. And the last thing, Tom, is to really love the music.
Yes.
And I don't mean that's the order of my 3, but that's you can't do without it, man.
You know, we had years and years ago, we had Harold Mayburn and Jamil Nasser come to the studio and play with my friend Ned Otter. I don't know if he's watching, but if he is, hello, Ned. A beloved student of George Coleman, and also who I know you played with, and Harold. And somebody asked him, you know, what was it like when you came to New York in the 50s? And what they said was that, I mean, it was just music 24 hours, 24/7. You felt if you went to sleep, you were going to miss something. And I'm just curious, because now we have MFAs in jazz. I mean, there's more structure from where I sit, just looking from the outside, than perhaps there was then. But do you miss that milieu of New York City back then and all the activity?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
New York had 4 jazz stations, man. One of them was run by Riverside Church. It was a complete jazz library with a very knowledgeable host, Will Moyle. WRBR had a great jazz show with Dr. Billy Taylor.
Oh, absolutely. I remember that.
You know, just the 2 top ones in New York. And they were on all the time, man. Now, what jazz is, it's spotty. It's not as intense because it's not all the time. There were 4 or 5 shows, radio stations in Chicago. There were 2 or 3 in Detroit. Years ago, Tom, there was a guy named Soupy Sales. He's a comedian.
Right.
He used to have every Saturday, he had jazz guys on his show. First time I saw Bud Powell was playing piano on the Soupy Sales show, a comedy show of kids. I saw Max Roach on Soupy Sales. He's an #1 comic who understands the value of something else other than a joke.
Right.
He's got the fantastic Bud Powell of all people.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
I miss that option. I miss having the choice to turn on TV and not see Jerry Springer or that act or those kind of shows, the reality show. That's what they want to see. That's what they do. But when I came to New York, man, turn on TV, jazz. Turn off TV, turn on radio, more jazz. I miss that. And I think if the younger players had that kind of immersive option, they play differently because they have some experience listening to somebody else for a long period of time.
See, one of the ways I look at this, though, is that when I was growing up, it was mainly rhythm and blues that was popular. You know, so I was in the Delphonics and Dramatics and Whispers, Main Ingredients, Stevie Wonder, Aretha, James Brown, Otis, and so forth and so on. See,
Yeah.
jazz was not central. Of course, I'm coming out of the church too, so we got James Cleveland and Shirley Caesar. I want to get into the Hawkins family. But jazz was recognizable because the blues element and the swing element and the improvisational element that was culminating in jazz music was still operating in those particular forms of music, but just not at the same level. It was not the same level. So jazz as a form of music, jazz as a way of life. And if you're wrestling with the blues, you're wrestling with catastrophe, lyrically expressed and existentially engaged. If you're wrestling with swing, you're trying to authorize a form of time and temporality that's different than the rut and the routine that mainstream society gives to you. So you make life swing as well as the music. And then the same is true with improvisation, which is not just for me an artistic skill. Improvisation is a form of practical wisdom, knowing how to make judgments on the spot in light of your discipline to find the right note, as you would put it in that
Absolutely. Yeah.
masterful documentary. And you see, when it then becomes a way of life, you just want jazz people in the world, whether jazz is the popular music or not, because it has created this way of life that then takes different forms in light of the younger generation that's further and further removed from the geniuses of the Art Tatums and the Sarah Vaughns and the Ron Carters and the Coltrane's and others.
But jazz, let's go back one 8 words. Jazz is a popular music, man. It's just not as popular as other musics.
Right, right.
You know, and I say that so the listeners of this tape don't feel that jazz has no following because it's not popular.
Yeah, I don't want to imply
wait a minute. Jazz is very popular. It's got a smaller audience to acknowledge that. The truth how popular it is, you go to the Blue Note when a jazz act is playing there, man. The place is sold out 2 weeks in advance. They want to hear the audience who wants to hear this, for them, popular music.
That's true. That's true.
So when you say jazz not popular, I kind of question the definitiveness of popular, because I think jazz is a very popular. You know, I just went to an event today, and someone introduced me to a person. So you're on cut. Yes. I said, wow. I don't know her, man. I don't know that couple, but somehow they know me. That's the level of popularity right there.
Right, right.
I'm not a stranger. I'm a guy who they know through something, who never spoke to me and only saw me once on the stage or a record or something like that, whatever their contact was. So music is popular enough to allow that to take place. Now, my friend last week
bless you, my brother Mike.
was very upset because I walked through Harlem and no one knew who I was. He wigged out. I said, man, wait a minute, don't stop. Sit down for this. Do like this. with a brown bag, you know? Yeah, they don't know, but they know Q-tip, but they know wherever the thing is. So they have music around them.
Right.
They're just not allowed to get saturated in what we do, our industry. And if that ever comes back again to a popular, look out.
Ooh, there it is. And you never can predict. Never can predict. But I went to see Blue Magic the other day down in Florida with Brother D. And see, Blue Magic used to have thousands and thousands of folk. They still popular, you're right now, just like jazz musicians, but it was a smaller group because every generation has its own form of dominant pop.
Yes, absolutely.
That's the only point I want to make here, you see.
Yeah, the difference though is that those musics that are popular have more options to be popular because they control more of the radio, for example.
Right.
You got all the radios, they got the Billboard top 15,000, whatever they call it. I mean, they got the big shows on TV.
Right.
You know, they only have jazz on commercial stuff. You know, if the ratio of the two musics of the four kinds of music, just to categorize it, the balance changed if we were allowed to shift this much. I can assure you this group be the jazz band.
Mm.
I'm telling you, all we need to do is find the right air to put it in.
Ooh. You know, I was blessed to write a song with the great Bootsy Collins on his Funk Capital of the World album. We wrote a song called Freedom, Freedumb, and how the music's getting dumbed down, you see. And what does it mean to dumb down the great music of a people whose music itself is a fundamental source of our sanity and our dignity? In that sense, it's a form of spiritual warfare going on.
Yeah, yeah.
Now people say, oh, that's conspiratorial, Brother West. Well, I know the world's complicated and complex, but there is a war that has been going on against Black folk, and given all the magnificent musical and artistic achievements we've had, it's always in the context of certain kind of white supremacist bombardment that we cannot downplay, even though we're not obsessed with it, because you can't be a jazz musician if it's just reacting to something. You got to create something. But the younger generation is getting music that is dumbed down. And Bootsy and I, we traveled the country with that song. And people say, well, you're getting a little bit too political. No, we're just trying to tell the truth about a great people.
I'm laughing because I know Bootsy. And
Oh, you know Brother Bootsy out of Cincinnati.
I can see him doing like this and playing.
I'm telling you, absolutely.
I have a question for you, Cornel. Actually, it's Cornel. I'm curious about the freedom you find in the form of Christ's teachings. Can you reflect on freedom within those guidelines?
Oh,
from
yeah.
A member from Delbert S.
Oh, I appreciate Brother Delbert. No, but you see, I come out of the Richards of Shiloh Baptist Church on the chocolate side of Sacramento, California, where we understood the gospel as radical love in freedom and radical freedom in love. So the dogma and the doctrine and all the rules were always subordinate to a love that was real as a heart attack, but it was unpredictable and improvisational and had to be manifest in a lot of different ways in different contexts. And so that Palestinian Jew named Jesus that meant so much to so many of we Black folk in our churches, different than the Constantinian Jesus that looks like Michelangelo's uncle. We're not talking about that Jesus. We're talking about a Jesus that ran the money changes out of the temple, 400 troops protecting that temple. He did it based on what? Not a hatred of rich people, a hatred of greed and his love for the least of these. What you do unto me, you do unto the least of these, so that the kingdom of God looks like a child, because a child has a sense of wonder. A child has a sense of openness to the world. And if the kingdom of God is within you, then everywhere you go, you ought to leave a little heaven behind. You see, that's what I heard at Shiloh Baptist Church. And I'll tell you, that frees up a Black man like me. Oh, yes, that frees up a Black man. So I'm a Jesus-loving Black man in that sense, even though it's very critical of institutional Christianity. And I learned from my Buddhist sisters like Bell Hooks. I learned from my Jewish brothers like Rabbi Heschel. I learned from my Muslims like Brother Malcolm X. I learned from Hindus like Gandhi. I have an openness, but I'm still rooted in gut bucket Black Baptist engagement with the blood at the cross. So that's just being true to me. Now, I know, Brother Ron, you've had some interesting formations growing up, right?
Yeah, well, you know, as quiet as it's kept, the only people who aren't acknowledged as being musically affected by church music are jazz musicians.
Interesting.
Just to let that lay for a moment, you know? Yeah, Black churches were always available to the community. Black churches had service 8 nights a week and on Sunday afternoons.
Mm.
And the families always went to at least 3 or 4 of those services. Out of these families came musicians.
Absolutely.
But no one says, what church did you go to? They just assume that you're not of that, you didn't wear a religious suit. so to speak, you know?
Right. That's, I did a tribute to Brother Count Basie a few months ago at the Count Basie Theater. Had a wonderful time in Red Bank.
Yeah.
And I talked about him coming out of Calvary Baptist Church, playing the piano every week, just like Sarah Vaughan coming out of Mount Zion Baptist Church, playing the organ when she's 4 years old. And of course, Coltrane come out of AME Zion Church. His grandfather is a preacher. He lived in the parsonage with the grand. So you can feel and see not dogma and doctrine of the church, but all of the rich cultural and musical ambience in that church that gave both self-respect, self-confidence, belief in oneself, and most importantly, the acknowledgement of the quest for excellence tied to serving others. Art is something that serves others, but you better be masterful, disciplined, practice in order to deliver.
Well, what's another way? There's not another way.
That's so true.
Great, thank you so much. Actually, Jack Weatherall, who I talked about in the beginning, sort of instigated all this. He has a question. He writes, in my experience of Shakespeare, I believe that Shakespeare writes moments that are deliberately ambiguous, inviting the actor to improvise, to jazz, he writes jazzing. Then he pulls back to the iambic pentameter, so he reasserts this form. Is there a parallel with composers or within the framework of a jazz band? Where
well, you're doing apples and oranges here. I think the concept of a classical orchestra to kind of keep the Shakespeare zone in mind. The concept of a classical orchestra playing the first two movements of Beethoven's symphony, and the third movement, they start jamming on all blues or so what. The question put on the table is that, for me, is that they want to see, they're questioning whether or not a classical music ensemble like that has the capacity and the interest to be able to do that, to do two movements of Beethoven Fifth and then play All the Things You Are by Don Sabesky arrangement. And then that. And he's proposing that actors, based on Shakespeare writing, have the same kind of latitude, or he encourages them to feel free to step away from the script and do some ad libbing. And then when it's time to lock it up, go back to page 7, paragraph 3. And that pulls to him, to that concept, he's hoping that the classical environment has so unlimited the classical player's scope that it frees them up to be comfortable enough to not feel that Beethoven is the only music available. And here's something by Miles Davis that's just as real, just as form-oriented, just as colorful, just as emotional as Dvorak's Going Home Symphony. And until he finds organizations that really step into that hole, it looks nice on paper.
Right. Yeah, I think he would probably respond by saying that he's not talking about moving away from Shakespeare, but that there's more form within a Shakespeare line, and then suddenly there's less. There's, particularly in the later plays, where he suddenly moves away from the iambic beat. And I guess the question is, does that exist in playing jazz or in composition? I think actually it does exist in some classical music. There is the invitation from the composer to the player to improvise a phrase.
Yeah, but they're not part of the common library. I mean, that's for the summer outdoor festival to be on the picnic area, just to keep the people with the two kids babysitting them out there in Central Park while they have this concert going on. Call the name of the tune correctly. I've done projects like that. I've taken classical pieces and rearranged them for jazz ensemble to be true to, I see it, a more reasonable expectation level of what I can do with a classical form, a classical melody, a classical set of changes with guys who know the classical library, who have done that for a living. Mm-hmm. But they're also very comfortable to take that concept and make it go like this. Mm-hmm. Going back to the way it was.
Yes, yes, yes. But that interplay between tradition and innovation, between form and novelty. I mean, I think in Shakespeare's case, I mean, he creates over 2,000 new words. Only Chaucer created more words in the English language. And Florio, Giovanni Florio, who translated Montaigne, he created almost 1,500 coming from Italy. But he was grounded in the English tradition. He was a Huguenot from Italy who came. And so when you're creating new words in the language, then jazz musicians say, well, what are the form of tradition and innovation in jazz? What is tradition of form and novelty in jazz? Well, you actually are creating something very new, even the way in which you're flattening the notes. And
absolutely, no question.
Actually, the newness is predicated on tradition, but in Shakespeare's case, all those new words, I mean, that's not the case for Bernard Shaw. I mean, we appreciate George and things, but he ain't doing that. He's got wit at a certain level, ain't got nothing to do with the profundity of Shakespeare in that sense. Now, Chekhov is different, but that's another form, another conversation. But that newness grounded on tradition is something that's very, very similar.
Yeah.
So we're winding down, but here's a good question for both of you from Douglas Long. What keeps you going through challenges? So maybe.
Okay, I'll take a swing at it first. I still got my uniform on. I'm still on the team. And I say that because I'm often asked, am I still doing this? You know? And that explains those people who have take a chance on my harshly worded response. This is what I do, number one. I like doing what I do. I like having the opportunity to do what I do because I am good at it. And four, I like going to work night in and night out to find out how much better can I get than I was last night, and how quickly can I affect my environment, the band, to follow my lead until and not question it until we get to the last place. I thrive on that stuff. I love the challenge of not knowing if I can convince them without talking to them. Night in and night out.
Musically.
I love to do that. Excuse me?
I love how you've woven your songs together, that there's a continuous thread. It's like a half an hour straight music. And I think that's so fascinating. And one can feel it because you're in the center and you can feel your nonverbal communication, both through the bass and also through your eyes. And it's really
socks. Wear certain socks. You know.
And socks.
Well, I tell you that Monday night that me and Anahita were there, he started off rubbing his bass, didn't play nothing, and kept on rubbing for a while. It wasn't like it was just a 3-second rub. And you could feel the build up. I don't know whether it was connected to the death of the great pianist from Pittsburgh or what, because almost tears were flowing from y'all's eyes at a certain moment. But that rubbing that bass and then finally moving into hitting that note, that's beyond drama. It was beyond drama. And it was something I've never seen. I must say, I've never seen that on the bass. Was that something that just hit you though, Maestro? What?
Well, you know, I'm interested on what sounds can I make with the bass short of playing a note, and can I tie that sound to lead into a note?
Oh yeah.
So I'm curious, you know, and then next time you see me, I may have something new up my sleeve.
Well, you remember Coltrane in Philadelphia in the November before he died, he throws his horn down at Temple University, started beating on his chest.
Yeah.
She said, "What's happening, Train? What's going on?" He just trying to get all of that music and love and struggle and contestation and shuddering and suffering and all of that out to the folk, and the horn was getting in the way. You must feel sometimes that your bass is in the way.
Yes, I do. But when it feels great, I own it. I love that kind of stuff, Doc.
You pushing it.
Yes.
Oh, brother, I tell you, the Lord has blessed you in a mighty way to have that kind of joy in life, man. That's a rare thing. And you know what? That's the fruit of love, is the joy. You know that.
Yes, sir.
Did you have a response to that question too? What keeps you going through challenges, Cornel?
Oh, no. I think the Maestro said it for me. It's the love and the joy. Now, of course, Frankie Beverly reminds us the joy and the pain go hand in hand. So let's keep it real. The love and bittersweet can even go hand in hand at times, but the love will triumph when you connect it in the right way. But I think the Maestro spoke for me.
I just want to thank you guys so much. We're getting notes pouring in. So much love and gratitude from the audience for Dr. West and Maestro. I have one here. I'm sitting here writing a paper on jazz and empowerment theory. Thank you for inspiring me. It was a privilege to be here. And this is from Kim. And this is a dream come true for me. I'm just so grateful to be able to weave the 75-year history of Adler through this moment with the two of you, talking about form and freedom in art and life.
Yes.
No.
I think that order is the right order.
Brother Tom, you are a treasure, man, and you putting a smile on Sister Stella's face. Don't you ever forget that, though, brother.
Oh, thank you.
I'm serious about that. I've seen it, and you know, or we've seen it in the other contexts that you do throughout the dialogue with Sondheim that we had. I mean, there's so many ways in which you exemplify the best of the great tradition of Stella Adler and the others, and always embracing other giants like the Maestro and the children and so forth. So it's just a beautiful thing to be in contact. And as you know, when you call, I come running, brother. You know
I do. I've been blessed.
You know that.
Blessed. Right. We got more work. We have more work to do.
No, that's so true. That's so true.
I will
give an example about the Maestro.
Yes.
I think I can run on and see what the end gonna be with that kind of motivation, that kind of inspiration. And no, we never come close to his level of excellence, but that's all right. We know what the standards are. We know what the standards are.
Yeah.
We got our own gifts. We got our own forms of love and joy.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. To be continued.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, indeed. Salute you, Maestro. Indeed. Love and respect you. And Sister Quintel, tell her I said hello. Oh, there she is. There she is.